Tēnā koutou Aotearoa, welcome to the BYC Podcast, coming here from the Export Beer Garden studio in the midst of another, I think, gloom-laden and fascinating week in recent New Zealand cricket history. This week we reflect on the announcement from New Zealand Cricket about Steady the Ship's future plans. We grind some gears about the warm-down matches against the Uganda Cricket Cranes and the Papua New Guinea Barramundis, and Davey Dum Dum provides more incontrovertible evidence that he's a massive punisher. I'm Paul Ford, godfather of the Beige Brigade, and I'm joined by master of the New Zealand Cricket Scoop this week, Dylan Cleaver, El Presidente of the Substack sports newsletter, The Bounce. DC, how are your optimism levels this week, mate?
Flatlining. It's been an interesting week, actually, particularly for myself. As you mentioned, I was lucky enough to get a tip that Kane Williamson was about to take up the option, turned down the option of a central contract in favour of a casual playing contract. I've sort of cheekily put it in here that he's literally torn up his contract and thrown it in the face of New Zealand CEO and friend of the BYC, Scott Weening. While New Zealand Cricket Players Association Capo di Capi, Heath Mills, laughs maniacally from his bolt hole in the Hanua Ranges. Which is
he does have a bit of a Marlon Brando feel about him sometimes, Heath Mills, and I mean that in a loving and respectful way.
Yes, yeah. So it is interesting. And look, I broke the story that he is going to take up a casual contract. There is all sorts of mechanics around it that make this reasonably unique. The fact that New Zealand doesn't have international cricket, doesn't have tests scheduled for that January window. He's almost certainly got an option to go and play in South Africa. Look, if you take it at face value, he is committing, it seems at least, for the medium to long term to New Zealand cricket. So I guess I wrote the news story, so I'm going to throw the analysis to you, Paul, and what does it all mean?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, I guess there was sort of some breadcrumbs that went there after the Papua New Guinea game where he got asked about what he was going to do and what were his plans after the early exit. And his words were, "I don't know," which is always, that's the kind of thing that a veteran journalist such as yourself may have clocked. He did say there's a bit of time between now and the 2026 World Cup in India and Sri Lanka. So it's about regrouping. We've got red ball cricket over the next year. So it's back into some other international formats and we'll see where things land. Well, that's hardly kind of a full level commitment. I think it did sort of indicate that he was trying to work out where to next. And I guess part of that might have been whether he was going to step away entirely from international cricket, maybe do a home summer, something like that. Sorry, I was just going to say the other thing as well, of course, then I did see some comments from Michael Vaughan absolutely putting the boot into Kane Williamson about his strike rate in the T20 World Cup. So good on Michael Vaughan for that, I guess. But yeah, look, I guess with the precedent of Trent Boult back in 2022, it's just no surprise that some of these guys that are kind of living in the double worlds of being our best players and also our most desirable players for T20 franchises and coming, I guess, the triple world also being wanted by the franchises, but also coming to the end of their careers and just trying to work out how to have a foot in both camps. It's hard to sort of deny them that. I think it was Andrew Gordy maybe on News Hub said something like, get over it and get used to it. And I think the alternate reality here is that we don't have Kane. And so I do think that generally New Zealand cricket here have done a good job. And I think Scott Weening taking him at face value and no reason not to, he basically said, world cricket's changing, it's changing dramatically, and we need to continue to be dynamic with our contracting situation. In other words, a bit like how we take on international cricket matches, we just kind of have to take what we're given a little bit in this front. We don't have the power. New Zealand cricket does not have the power. Sure, I mean, they could say, cool, well, if you're going to go and do that, Kane, we're not going to have you play for us at all. Yes, that's an option. I don't think that's better. And it's a pretty funky summer with certainly bugger all cricket, bugger all test cricket and zero test cricket, I think, in January. And it's hard to deny Kane an opportunity like that. Particularly, I don't know if you have had a quick look at the numbers, DC, but those salaries in that South African T20 or the SA20 league, just ballpark salaries. Harry Brook, he was on 180 grand, Jimmy Neesham 290 grand, Liam Livingstone 737 grand, and Tristan Stubbs, the highest paid player, $800,000. So, literally Kane Williamson could go over there and get paid more than what he gets paid by New Zealand cricket. It's just a reality that our guys, as they come to the end of their careers, are going to be considering their options.
Yeah, and look, I had a little bit of correspondence saying this was a silly move by Kane because he's not good enough to play IPL anymore. He's not that attractive to IPL. And look, that might actually be true. The IPL cricket may have moved past Kane and his particular style of playing, but he's still hellishly attractive, I would imagine, to franchise leagues like the SA20, like the IL T20 in the UAE, because he's a name. He's a great bloke that brings no baggage with him, and he's almost effectively like a player coach within some of those setups, particularly for the young guys. So I don't think I would push back on the notion that the T20 game has moved past him. I think maybe the IPL has, and maybe his shortcomings have been exposed a little bit even at T20 eyes, but there's still certainly plenty of opportunities for him to cash in that respect. He arrived back in the country this morning, as it happened, and did a stand-up media at Auckland Airport, and here's what he had to say.
I think everybody has a different situation, and they're trying to assess what it is for them and for me and my family, and at this stage of my career and the calendar that we have coming up. It's something exciting and something to look forward to, and something a little bit different, without really interfering with the international schedule. So although it's turning down, I suppose, a central contract, it's really no different in terms of the playing schedule and representing New Zealand. I mean, I want to play as long as I can. Love playing for New Zealand. I've really enjoyed my time captaining, and it's been a privilege and an honour to do that for a number of years, and I'm excited with what's next for the team in terms of their leadership as well, and I'm looking forward to being a part of that. In terms of a time frame, it's difficult to say. Want to keep being fit, keep doing as well as I can, keep trying to improve and play as long as I can.
Yeah, look, I think that's probably what you'd expect Kane Williamson to say. And look, the one
maybe once he's actually torn his contract up, do you think he might start sort of swinging from the rafters and become an incredibly amazing media interview, just teeing off on people left, right and centre and taking no prisoners? Or do you think he's going to just keep sort of netting and just keeping everything out, DC?
I think he still likes to play a fairly straight bat when the opportunity presents itself. And look, I would say that, look, this may be a positive in this particular case as regards Kane Williamson's immediate future with the Black Caps. And we all, purists, we're purists. We want to see him play Test cricket for as long as possible. We want to see him smash some of those batting records. Well, he's actually already smashed all the New Zealand batting records. We want to put them into areas that perhaps no one's going to get to in our lifetime. So when we're old and grey, we can tell our grandkids about the magnificence of Kane Williamson. But I do think that it's gilding the lily slightly to not acknowledge that the widest symptoms of this are troubling for New Zealand cricket, in that the Super Smash, which is our franchise T20 league, just holds no appeal for our best players. Maybe I'm being a little bit harsh there, but not by much.
Well, no, I don't think you are, and I think where it's getting to as well is that not only is it, why is it not appealing? It's because the best players aren't playing because they are in hot demand in South Africa, in the UAE, and the
Pakistan,
and the new American league that's going to spark up, which is going to clash pretty much directly. And then you've got the Big Bash pretty much either just before or just after. I haven't got that schedule in my brain. I know they've compacted it a bit to sort of get out of the way of other tournaments and so forth, but. Yeah, it does, I guess, reiterate what a backwater the Super Smash really is from an international cricketer's point of view.
Yeah, but it also, the Super Smash does make up quite a significant portion of what New Zealand cricket sells to the local broadcasters. If you're TVNZ now or you're Sky TV and you're looking to negotiate the next deal with New Zealand cricket, they're not really in a position of strength when they get around that table and say, hey, we've got this great T20 product for you that you can put on prime time in those summer months where people are, sitting around having beers with their mates. they're going to push back on that now.
That's right, and just to remind people, so currently, if you're a player with a essential contract with New Zealand cricket, you have to commit to obviously playing the international matches, pretty much, and you have to commit to being available for the Super Smash competition. That's kind of those are the two main criteria around availability. And yes, you're right. If you're going to have players you're going to have that as a rule with a couple of asterisks, and those asterisks are your most important players. Look, I think, that's right. One thing I would say is I have absolutely no doubt that when Williamson talks about wanting to play for New Zealand and his patriotic calling and how much he loves playing for the team, that does ring true with him. He could 100% be pulling up stumps here or saying, hey, I'm going to play the test matches against England and I'm going to go into Christmas and I'm going to put my feet up and I'm just going to travel the world with my little kids and my English wife and kind of, never play for New Zealand again. And I don't think anyone wouldn't be sad, but you'd go, you know what? He's done a pretty bloody good shift. But yeah, interesting, very, very interesting times for cricket in New Zealand and New Zealand cricket for sure.
Hey, if this is the last time Kane Williamson ever captains his country, and it's looking more and more likely, it's a non-negotiable. You cannot captain your country if you're not on a central contract. What's his legacy? What's his imprimatur that he leaves on New Zealand cricket as a skipper? And before you say that, I'm just going to run through a few facts and figures for you. In tests, he captained 40 times for 22 wins. As a batter and as a captain, he averaged 57.43, which is significantly higher than his overall average. 1100s as a captain. He captained the second most tests after Flem and had the second best winning percentage of those who had captained at least 10 tests, behind the one and only Tim Southee, who's captained exactly 10 tests. ODIs, he captained 91 times for 46 wins. He averaged 51.35 as a batting captain in ODIs, which again is significantly higher than his overall average. 700, second most ODIs, captain behind Flem. Somewhat surprisingly, this actually, sixth best winning percentage of a captain with those who have at least 10 games skippered, behind Tom Latham, Brendan McCullum, Daniel Vittori, which I was surprised about actually, Jeff Howarth, and John Wright, which I was even more surprised about. T20s captain 75 times, 50% plus winning record, just over 50%. I think most T20Is captained, obviously, averaged 33.64 with the bat with 1650s, only a tiny bit higher average with the bat as a captain. Those are the raw numbers, but more generally, more holistically, how do you view him as a captain across those formats?
Well, I guess that's the thing. Is he going to go down in time as probably our greatest? When you look at some of the results that the team has gained with him, either as a player or as a captain across all formats, he has been one of those constant presences over the last, 15, 20 years, whatever you just said. So an extraordinary batsman, a fantastic captain across all formats, and I guess a leader of men in a very kind of Kane Williamson way, just that classic way that we've talked about before. New Zealanders love it. Sure, Brendan McCullum did it in a different way, but Kane Williamson is your stoic, follow me kind of a guy. I've got this. I never panic. Acknowledge, very respectful of the opposition. All of those sorts of things. I think he is going to be looked back upon. People are going to. Well, he's literally already talked about as one of the all-time greats, potentially our greatest cricketer of all time. And even any time you're being mentioned in the same breath as Sir Richard Hadley, you're starting to be in quite a pantheon of New Zealand cricket. And I think, I guess I've kind of touched on it there, but I think that the way that he's played the game, I think the guys that have played with him, I think he's managed to keep the team together. Potentially, after Brendan McCullum, you could have seen things splinter and fragment, but the fact that Kane was there, we call him steady the ship, and it's steadying that ship of the Black Caps in this sense. He's the kind of person that players stay around to play with. Because he'll probably help you win the games, but he's obviously just one of those guys that people get out onto the field for and play for. He brings them together. So I think that piece around the way that he's played the game, and the other thing as well, and I don't put heaps of stock in this, but you do get the sense that he's the kind of person that gets on with basically every single player in international cricket, which is quite extraordinary.
Yeah, I find it quite tricky to describe his legacy as a skipper because following the Black Caps during the Brendan McCullum captaincy era, it was almost like a visceral experience. Not so much with Kane Williamson, but it was kind of better. And I'm not quite sure why. I really struggled to articulate why I enjoyed watching the Black Caps under Kane Williamson, possibly more than I did it under Brendan McCullum. Yet Brendan McCullum, it was just such a seat-of-the-pants ride. It was
bombastic.
And it was all those cliches like tumbling into advertising hoardings to save a meaningless one and this kind of thing. And it was great fun, but it was almost like he set them up and then Kane Williamson it was this ultra smooth transition. Maybe we drifted back into more percentage style of cricket. I wouldn't go so far as to say we went back to the Daniel Vettori, very kind of statistical data heavy percentage style of cricket. But there was something that there was a bit of a sparkle missing. And yet the way they went about it was just so pristine that I thoroughly enjoyed it. I followed them around for a summer as a reporter while I was still at the Herald. It was the summer they qualified for the World Test Championship. Unfortunately, I didn't get to go to Southampton and watch the crowning glory. But I covered all those tests where they qualified. And it was the most fun I've had covering cricket. And yet I'm not quite sure why. And I've struggled to articulate it. And that will always be this paradox I have with Kane Williamson, but I think he is New Zealand's greatest cricketer. And if you want to argue the toss with Sir Richard Hadley, I'm happy for you to do that because Paddles was legendary and groundbreaking and barrier breaking in terms of giving New Zealand cricket that respectability they'd never had. I just think Kane Williamson's probably done more for the game overall, but yeah, it's sad, but I'm glad we've got him as a player and a world-class batter for it sounds like another 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, we'll take every little piece of that hairy little man from Tauranga that we can get over the next few years. Hey, we're going to take a quick break, DC, and then we'll come back and we'll go into the entrails of the World T20 campaign and New Zealand's warm-down games. Welcome back to the BYC. And DC, I think you've described it as New Zealand peaking perfectly to thrash Uganda and Papua New Guinea, giving those cricketing superpowers a jolly good hiding and teaching those bastards a lesson. Is that your sort of take on things? Yeah. I thought they planned this campaign perfectly, really, didn't they? They knew they were underdone getting there, but it didn't bother them one little bit because by the time they got to it was Uganda first, wasn't it? They were ready to put them to the sword, dismissing Uganda for 40 and then chasing it down with their loss of just 1 wicket in 5.2 overs. They followed that up again by inserting Papua New Guinea and dismissing them for 78 and then chasing it down with the loss of 3 wickets, actually. And it took them a wee while, 12.2 overs to win by 7 wickets. We had a man on the ground over there, actually, Paul. Do you want to read what he has to say about this? Yeah, we did. Yeah, it's an interesting little piece of correspondence. Well, that all went about as well as expected, but I have to get this off my chest. What a dick move by Kane to bowl first last night. He could have at least let the guy smash 200 against the Minnows and give the New Zealand fans who travelled there something to cheer about. I love Kane, but it was like they just wanted to get home early. After the game, the Ugandan players came over and acknowledged their fans who travelled halfway around the world from Africa to support them. We got a wave from lovely Trenty. Anyway, I'm off to St. Lucia now for the West Indies versus Afghanistan game, which I thought would decide our place in the quarters. I'm a West Indies fan now. Looking forward to the next podcast. That's from Mark. Cheers, Mark, and safe travels, mate. Tough going over there.
And we also received this from Matt. He said, "Hey guys, is watching our guys sit on the sideline on the IPL and them playing poorly when they do play get kind of humiliating for Black Cap fans. It was okay when we would perform well in tests and World Cups and prove everyone wrong. Do these guys think that not preparing well and getting thrashed at the World Cup will earn them lucrative T20 contracts?" First really negative message in a long time from Matt. So there is a little bit of angst. After also Mark described Kane's dick move, perhaps he's one that's not as upset as a number of people are, that he's tuning down the captaincy. Look, I don't know if we need to scavenge around in the entrails of that campaign much more than he already had, other than say it did not go well, Paul.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Maybe I did hypothesise that perhaps the players were a bit worried about Cricket Violence Corner being committed by those New Zealand fans who travelled 10,000 miles to be at that game. I do wonder if the players just wanted to get the hell out of there. I'm not really defending it, more of an explanation, really. I guess the most interesting things about that game were, and I think Cole Mills said this actually on the Agenda podcast, it's a weird T20 game when the thing that you're talking about the most is 24 dot balls, which is, of course, what Lockie Ferguson brought to the party, alongside the very, very valuable wickets, of course, of Vala, Amini and Soper.
Chad Soper, I love that.
Yeah. I guess the other thing that caught my eye, Finn Allen got a couple, I think, against Uganda, but failed again against Papua New Guinea. He has had a tough time. Look, nice for Sodi to finally get a game. That's the other thing that caught my eye. He would have had a very frustrating couple of weeks over there. Yeah,
we should probably talk about Lockie a little bit, actually, because and look, just to go to Mark's point one more time, I think it would be more patronising if you win the toss on clearly a bowl first wicket and then just have a bat for shits and giggles. I don't think cricket quite works like that. So I will defend Kane in this decision to bowl first, although if I was at the ground and had travelled that far, I would have also been mortified. So I think you can both be right on this occasion.
We're probably also slightly surprised that New Zealand did actually read the conditions correctly in this instance and managed to get the job done after making the right decision.
Yeah. But Lockie, 4 overs, 4 maidens, 3 for naught is extraordinary, and he backs that up also with the news that he is to decline his national contract. He won't be given the kind of sweetheart deal Kane is getting, and I think that's fine. I think that's fair enough. I think Lockie probably understands it's fair enough. Thoughts on Lockie's decision and I guess his future, because he is still a quality bowler at T20I level.
I was just trying to work that out, DC, and I'm sure you can clarify this for me. So Lockie Ferguson has declined his central contract, which means that, does that mean that he is no longer available for New Zealand for white ball games, or is he running a sort of a Trent Bolt scenario where he can kind of, or a Jimmy Neesham type scenario where he's freelancing and available to play and will be picked? So he's available to play and can be picked, I guess that's my question.
Yeah, he can still be picked. But the difference, I guess, between, and we're getting right into the weeds of contracts here, but I guess the difference is if you're on a central contract, you get a retainer for the year. And then you get your match fees on top of that. Kane has moved on to a casual contract, so when he is available for New Zealand and when he's in camp with New Zealand, he will be paid a retainer for that time as well as his match fees. Lockie Ferguson and I believe Adam Milne might be another one who turns down a central contract. When they play for New Zealand, they are playing for match fees only.
Gotcha. That's a great clarification. I guess the other point that has been made and maybe applied inconsistently or on a needs-must basis, but is that you would expect that centrally contracted players will be preferred primarily ahead of casual players and uncontracted players. So that would, Lockie's move would probably be good news, if you want to put it that way, for the likes of Will O'Rourke, Ben Sears, those guys that are kind of fringe selections at the moment. And when all the big dogs are back, they're not quite breaking that first 11.
Yeah, so those guys that were hovering around sort of 21 to 25 on the ranking list that just miss out on the central contracts, and they would then be bumped down to the top domestic contracts, which really only contract for 6 months. So, I don't know who is around that 21 to 25 mark, but you are probably talking about your O'Rourke. So no, actually, O'Rourke will be well up the list now because he's shown himself.
It could even be a Nathan Smith or someone like that might come into the frame.
Smith, a Sears, maybe even a Henry Nichols, who's really only considered for ODI and tests, and he's been dropped from the test team. He's probably hovering around that 20, 21 level now. So those sort of guys might be hoping that a couple more decide to hand their contracts in, because we should make a note here that they still are desirable. I think for the bulk of cricketers in New Zealand, a central contract is very desirable. It's a 6-figure sum, isn't it? So if you're going to turn down that contract, you've either got to be backing yourself
that you're going to be doing well in a as a professional cricketer in other parts of the world, or you've got a really good day job with heaps of annual leave. So yeah, good luck with either of those two things. Both are pretty niche arrangements. I guess the other thing that we might see in terms of those contract lists is we might get a little taste of how the selectors are seeing New Zealand's needs for the future of T20. And have you got any thoughts on the types of things that you'd like to see in terms of, I guess, reconfiguring the approach that the Black Caps are taking to T20, given it's proven reasonably ineffective apart from against a couple of smaller nations?
Yeah, I've noted three things that I'd like to see. I'd like to see more power up and down the order, but particularly up the order. We can't just throw the entire burden onto Finn Allen, who, as we've discussed ad nauseum, we're still not quite sure if he is going to be able to deliver consistently enough at international level to be the player that we need him to be at the top. So more power up and down the order. I think we've got a great white ball bowler in Mitchell Santner, but I'd like to see faster, flatter spinners. I think we've got, and I think I might have mentioned this last week. If I didn't, I mentioned it in my newsletter. I think we've got very good, very clever, good wicket spinners who can out-fox batters from time to time. But I think when the conditions suit spin bowlers, we need guys like Jadeja and guy from the West Indies, Akil Hussain, who just rip it in, just bowl good balls, fast, flat balls that are hard to score. So I'd like to see that. And finally, as I've made a note here, I would like to see a hard-assed, virulently rednecked, deeply unpleasant Australian fielding coach who is just going to get those boys and give them no leeway whatsoever. He is going to be on them. They're going to hate him and hate every minute of working with him, but they're going to restore New Zealand's pride in the field.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, I wonder who's available. It sounds like, are you advocating for Matthew Hayden to join the New Zealand cricket team, or are there a few exceptions to your that you're going to veto as part of that plan?
Yeah, what's beyond deeply unpleasant? You can't go beyond that. So I'm thinking more in terms of like your Stumper Rickson kind of guys. Actually, that's good. He was quite a good bloke, actually.
Well, we'll talk about it shortly. There's a guy called David Warner that's going to be looking around for offshore jobs. I'm sure he'd be real keen to come and help the Black Caps.
Yeah. What about yourself? Have you identified anything that you'd like to see more of or see introduced into the Black Caps T20 environment?
I mean, I guess I'm just aligning with a couple of those points that you make. I think we talked about it last week, but that, it's the writing instructions that go to Finn Allen. If you're going to have him, if we're going to make the most of those 36 balls in the power play, then we're going to have to absolutely redline that top order. So yes, you talk about power up and down the order, and I think maybe the power is there. It's just like, let's absolutely commit to using it. That's the way T20 cricket's going, and we are falling behind when we're just trying to sort of knock it around and mow down any total really, really late. Bowlers are getting smarter, and I think we're missing some opportunities at the top. So I completely agree with you there. And yes, how good would it be if we could get Rashid Khan to emigrate to New Zealand? Given the current state of international diplomacy between the two countries, possibly unlikely. But where do we get a mystery spinner from in Hamilton, Palmerston North, Lincoln, or your beloved New Plymouth? I'm not sure that they exist. There's a couple of guys. Adi Ashok, I guess, is floating around. I think those getting our guys overseas and actually playing in some of these international T20 comps feels super, super important because, as you say, those are the types of spinners that are going absolute gangbusters. If the West Indies can do it, I suspect that we can as well. But, it's going to take some big changes in our pitches and the way that we're bringing players through and getting some of those New Zealand A guys over to weird places to do weird things.
One other thing I thought of, we're probably in the market for a left-arm swing bowler now as well. I know if Jason Hoyt was with us now, he might be advocating for Ben Lister. I thought he went a bit off him last summer, didn't he? Which was a bit rough. It's like he felt spurned by him when he didn't immediately start taking 5-wicket bags for New Zealand.
Very fickle, our Jason. Very fickle. Hey, I don't know if you've caught any of the South Africa versus United States match this morning, DC. It's Super 8 time. Of course, New Zealand not there, which does mean I only watch the replays. But South Africa beating the United States by 18 runs in the first Super 8 game was it Antigua, I think?
North Sound Antigua, yep.
Yeah, South Africa racking up 194 for 4, and I had a cheeky little bet on Quinton de Kock to come right in this game, and he did absolutely blazed away. I think he got 74.
Yep.
And I'm sure the South Africans would have absolutely loved being on an actual cricket ground that didn't have the field, the sand spray painted green to look like grass, and a pitch that seemed to be pretty sweet to bat on. They walloped at 194 for 4. To be fair, United States 176 for 6, a pretty decent run chase with some absolute fireworks from Andreas Roos, the South African-born, expat, I guess, but 80 not out. Extraordinary knock from him.
Yeah, it was. And look, USA have actually been really handy at this World Cup, and obviously they haven't had the greatest of conditions either, but yeah, I've been quite impressed with them, and I hope it's making a little dent over there. The guy Netravka, I keep on forgetting how to say his name properly, the Indian
Netravalka?
Netravalka, the Indian left armour, Silicon Valley executive, he bowled really well again, so fair play to them. At the moment,
I was just going to say, you want to speak about hard-ass, virulently redneck, deeply unpleasant Australian coaches. They've got Stuart Law in there, and he did soften a little bit this week. He broke because I think he's been flogging them to death in the field and all that sort of thing. And he was asked whether many of his players had to go back to their bosses and ask for extended leave, and he said yes, quite a few of them actually did. They'd only sort of booked out to the group matches. So I think there's a few of them becoming national heroes, and I'm sure the bosses have signed those off wholeheartedly. But just an interesting little sideline there from Stuart Law.
As we're speaking at the moment, actually, it's and obviously it's pointless giving a match report to a game that's halfway, not even halfway through, and will be finished by the time you're listening to this. But I can tell you the West Indies are batting first against England at St. Lucia, and after 14.2 overs are 125 for 1 with Pooran and Powell going great guns, and Powell has just hit 2 sixes in a row off Livingston, so it's now 131 for 1, and that is a Group 2 match being played at St. Lucia tonight. Overnight we have India versus Afghanistan. That's a Group 1 match. The Super 8s are split into 2 groups. That's in Barbados. Tomorrow lunchtime we have Australia-Bangladesh, Group 1 from Antigua. And then Saturday, 2:30 a.m., England, South Africa, Group 2 from St. Lucia. The Saturday lunchtime game is West Indies, USA, Barbados. Sunday, 2:30 in the morning, Bangladesh v India at Antigua. And then Sunday lunchtime game is Afghanistan v Australia. And that kind of takes you through the weekend. A lot of cricket. It's just, even reading that out, it feels sad to read that out without New Zealand there. New Zealand should be there ahead of your likes of your USAs, your Bangladeshs, your Afghanistans. Well, they shouldn't because they didn't qualify. But, it's doesn't feel right that those teams are there.
As a New Zealand cricket podcast, it doesn't, but I can tell you that the Afghani cricket podcasts are absolutely rubbing their hands with glee, and all of the American cricket podcasts are very, very excited, and the Bangladeshi ones as well. I think those 3 teams are probably all quite surprised to be there and having they're going to run a full Netherlands vibe and just be extremely happy to be there and just go absolutely nuts and have a hell of a time. Did look like the Americans were like, well, we're not going to just knock it around and get and just sort of see how we go. We're going to absolutely go for it and try and make some magic happen. We're in the bonus round. I do really hope that England get up and do something interesting against I hope that the West Indies negate England's attempts to ruin their home tournament. That would be good in today's game. And God, wouldn't it be lovely to sit down slightly hungover on Sunday after the Super Rugby and the Warriors on Saturday night and watch Afghanistan do something filthy to the Australians.
It would be good. Hey, we're going to take a short break now and then come back with some from the David Warner files and a bit of violence.
Welcome back to the BYC. You're with Paul Ford and Dylan Cleaver talking absolute rubbish about Kane Williamson, the Black Caps, delving into the entrails of the T20 World Cup. And now, DC, you've got a little bit of news from our great friend of the podcast, Davey Dum Dum, David Warner. What's he up to?
Ahead of the Super 8 opener against Bangladesh, he was speaking to News Corp and to the cricket.com.au website in Antigua, and he said, since 2018, I've probably been the only one that's ever copped a lot of flack. And he's, of course, talking about the
use of sandpaper at Cape Town, 2018.
The ball tampering scandal of Cape Town and the aftermath of that. And to which Michael Clark said on a ESPN Cricket Info show that he's involved in, that he's a panelist on, he said, Davey has certainly copped it. There's no doubt about it. I just think the timing is probably not right. I think it probably would have been suited for the end of a World Cup rather than the middle of it, because there's probably other players in the team who would prefer this not to be spoken about right now. But there's parts of what he said that are correct. And I'm not actually sure that there's not many parts to it for a start. He's basically just said he's the only one that's been really penalised for the ball tampering scandal. And I think Cameron Bancroft would quite like a word, given he hasn't played a test since.
I do seem to remember seeing a few photos of Steve Smith crying as well. I think it's another signal of David Warner's self-obsession. I think that the world does seem to review the world as, with him at the centre of it. That's what I'm trying to get to. And I think, it's an interesting one. I think there is a little bit of an undercurrent in there, though, which is that, he's kind of, I think there's two things. He's under a lifetime leadership ban. Yep. So, you do your crime, you do your time. Well, not in this case. You do the time and then you just keep doing the time. And you can never kind of escape that punishment.
And he did ask for that to be reviewed and it was rejected, wasn't it?
Yep. And his wife very helpfully waded in on that battle. And, I think fair enough, to be honest with you. I think it's a pretty reasonable thing to dig into from a just a natural justice point of view. But anyway, that's done and dusted. I think the other thing that's in his comments is that it's kind of, he is hinting that other people involved around this were protected. That's an interesting little thing there. And he himself, I think at the follow-on quote from the piece that you mentioned was that he said, I've taken a lot of pressure off a lot of guys as well. And I think understandably, I've been the person to be able to absorb that, but one can only absorb so much. There's some interesting dynamics in that team, I imagine, around that incident still ongoing.
Well, there has always been this feeling that it's curious that the three people penalised for the ball tampering are all batters who didn't directly stand to gain from the ball tampering, and that the bowling attack on that day have got away scot-free. It probably hasn't been written, but that is the unspoken subtext of that, isn't it? That,
Totally. And, over those, when we've talked about it before, but the other thing is that Warner's been an absolute magnet for controversy his whole career. I mean, not his fault, but of course, even just getting picked into the Australian team, having never played, Sheffield Shield cricket, he's sort of always either accidentally or deliberately sort of antagonised purists, punched Joe Root. He's just been in the, I guess even just the way that he's played the game, just trying to hit slug balls for six. Murph Hughes talked about he talks about David Warner as the junkyard dog, that he'd bite your leg off if you give him half a chance, all those sorts of things. Just an abrasive character that's just a magnet for controversy.
Yeah, although Usman Khawaja said something really interesting about that recently, and I guess as a caveat, those two have played cricket with and against each other since they were knee-high to a grasshopper. They played in the same junior rep team, or maybe in the same junior club team. So they're obviously close. But Usman Khawaja said that he felt that Warner was manipulated into being someone he wasn't, that he was basically given the task of being the on-field aggressor, the arsehole, the guy that pushed the boundary, with Nathan Lyon's words, the guy that headbutted right up to the line. He said that when certain elements were removed from that team, and it was post-Cape Town, essentially, he said that when David Warner came back after Cape Town, that is the real David Warner. He was finally allowed to be himself, and he was a far different character, far friendlier face, I guess.
The Reverend.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, probably the truth lies somewhere between those two poles. But, yeah, there might be something in that, and I've always got the feeling that David Warner might be quite easily manipulated.
I was just going to say he's been treated like he's the manipulator, and maybe he is an element of being manipulated. Yeah, an interesting one. All right. Hey,
I've got one more thing, actually. I think last week I asked the question following on from Bruce Paradu, who died in Hamilton, who was the former Trinidadian cricketer who died in Christchurch in 2013. The answer, of course, was Simpson Clemente Gillan, who was better known as Sammy Gillan, who wicket-kept in New Zealand's first Test win against the West Indies, and in fact took the stumping to win the Test, having previously represented that Caribbean conglomerate. He also played a Chatham Cup final in 1954. I did not realise this till recently, though his Western AFC side lost in the final to only Hunga, and apparently he was a man who loved to chat, did Sammy Gillan.
I'll tell you another amazing fact. His grandson is Logan Van Beek. How good.
Correct. Yeah.
Sensational. Yeah, amazing. The DNA of cricketers is real, isn't it? It's a real thing. The talent is transferred for sure. Yeah, magnificent player. Hey, speaking of magnificent, this is the complete opposite. It's time for Paul Ford's Cricket Violence Corner.
Paul Ford's Cricket Violence Corner.
Got two this week, DC. Just very quickly, of course, our very own Tim Southey has been involved in some violence and been handed an official reprimand after lashing out at a hand sanitising dispenser. This was at the Brian Lara Cricket Academy. I think we can all, I empathise with Tim for this, but it did result in a level 1 breach of the ICC Code of Conduct, which relates to the abuse of cricket equipment or clothing or ground equipment or fixtures or fittings during an international match. He has a unblemished disciplinary record now with one little black mark on it. The second one is also World Cup related. The world of Pakistan cricket has been rocked by a controversial incident involving fast bowler Haris Rauf. This has gone viral in the subcontinent. Outside his team hotel during the T20 World Cup in the USA following Pakistan's disappointing exit, he's caught on video. He looks visibly upset and confronts a group of fans over their alleged disrespectful remarks, despite efforts from bystanders, including his wife, who's in full regalia and trying to intervene. He expresses his frustration quite openly, I think is probably the best way of saying it. And there was he sparked a diplomatic incident as well by assuming that some of the fans, or one of the fans, I think was Indian. The fan has confirmed that he is actually Pakistani and was just having a crack at his own player for having a bit of a shit tournament. So, a bit rough. But
he did say that if you bring my family into it, I will go at you. Something to that effect. And how very New Zealand, isn't it, that the violence involves a antibacterial sanitizer. Yeah, we like to keep our violence very clean.
Very clean violence. Cool. Well, I'm glad. I think you set a challenge of Cricket Violence Corner having to go around the world, and it's good that New Zealand's finally done something that we can. But whether it qualifies as violence,
fair play to you. That's well done.
Hey, Dylan, I think that's just about us. Thanks everyone for tuning in, dialing down, downloading, whatever you're doing, riding home from work, punching walls. Yes, as Dylan said, you're going to need to fill your week watching other teams play out the Super 8s. Hopefully Afghanistan continue to wreak havoc throughout this tournament and we can look back and go, at least we lost to them and they were really damn good. I mean, this could be an Afghanistan-West Indies final in this World Cup. We'll be back next week. In the meantime, if you've got anything to get off your chest, send us a short diatribe to byc@basebrigade.co.nz. Ka kite and kia kaha.